I could just keep listening to this, just give me a moment here. I know that you're all Who fans, but I'm just wondering how many people feel that Quadrophenia is probably the best album that Who ever did. Yeah. Exactly, all of us. I got it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Also, thanks to Anita Chang for the shout-outs, just like right before this, which was a pleasant surprise. Thank you. I think we're on to something. As she said too, it's really good. The upcoming user research talks for tomorrow. Sean McKay doing avoiding vapor research, how to plan, capture, and share user research effectively. And Kyle Sosi, who is the epitome of awesomeness. When you look up the definition, you have a whole article devoted to Kyle Sosi. Tomorrow she's doing Gather Round, sharing the stories from UX research. So there's a lot of UX researchy stuff going on. And what I thought we would do today is kind of talk about these things, a quick agenda, and let me know what y'all think of this, if this works for you. I want to focus on enterprise user experience research. There's a broad area of research, as we know, and user research encompasses many things. I'm going to kind of narrow it to enterprise user research. One reason being that I think a lot of times enterprise work gets short shrift when it comes to research. Talk about why we should do research in the first place. Why is there error? What the problem is with research. Bring in the Who back again. And I'm going to talk about 5 questions. If you read the description, and we're talking about 5 questions in 15 minutes. Take a little tip from Randall Bramlett about how to organize your work, and briefly talk about what you can learn in that 15. Discussion afterwards and that sort of thing. Does that? And again, the only thing is I would say for everybody is if you would use the mic to ask questions or disagree violently. Any problems with this? Anything that doesn't present? Does that sound good? Can we rock and roll? Okay, yeah, let's go on. So what is enterprise UX? So a lot of different definitions. A lot of people have talked about this. There's a whole conference that is around enterprise experience, and I'll talk about that at the end. But enterprise user experience design has to do with the stuff that people actually do. So you think about the context that people do this in. It's usually in offices, shops, manufacturing, places where people do work. And so there activities that people are doing are timesheets, or they're doing expense reports, or they're doing lookup of diseases, indications in some sort of internal tool that lets them provide care. Productivity applications, and also massive corporate purchasing, stuff I've recently been working on. Not just ordering new shoes, which I probably need a new pair, but it is that different scale, but it's still doing stuff to get a task done. Stuff that employees do, right? It's just as opposed to other things. In other words, it's what I call UX for the rest of us. There are some sketch books on the tables. Feel free to take what you like. I'm a big fan also of taking notes and sketching and that sort of thing, and have a little bit of takeaway with you. So, Dieter Rams has a wonderful quotation about this, and props to Sarah Betcher, sorry Sarah, flip up your names. She did a talk at the EDUI in Charlottesville and posted Dieter Rams' quotation. It's really true that when we're doing work, it's about people. Indifference towards people and the reality in which they live is actually the one and only cardinal sin in design. Right? I mean, if we're going to have any sort of absolutes, or if we believe in any sort of absolutes and not it depends, or, brand names of a certain undergarment, I mean, it usually holds the same sort of detritus. We have to take a stand, we have to say something, and Dieter Rams, I think, does it very well. And it's about people. It's about dealing with actual people. You know, we've all worked in different situations, and I love this Tomer Sharon quote from his Validating Product Ideas book. And this is a really good thing, and I like the way he starts this off where he says, while not an easy technique to apply, and I like the fact that he agrees that this is not easy to do, and especially in an enterprise setting. Observing people in their natural context of using products or services can take you a long way toward deeper learning about a real problem. And that's the thing, we need deeper learning, and we need to make sure that we're talking about real problems. So again, succinctly, user research is just asking these questions. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to approach it, but come on. It's the 5 W's and the orphan H. You know, who is their user, what do they do, why do they do it, where do they do it, when do they do it, and how do they do it? You know, it'd be great if we could find the answers to those questions. It will take us a long way to understanding people, the context, and identifying a solution to the problem. So, let's talk a little bit, though, about the problem with research. And this is going to be a little bit of a shout out. I'll start this off, though, with another great quote. The background is, again, I did this lab thing, you know, with the, you know, using the software and the, you know, two-way mirrors and the, you know, audio and setting these things up, people coming in, and Nate Bolt and Tony Talathamudi. Thank you, Lou. But this is so true, right? I'm sure that you have stories about bringing people into the place, and it's a big deal. It's always a big deal to have them take time out of the day. They have to travel someplace. Oh, do you validate parking? Are we... you know, is it going to interfere with lunch? Is there traffic? Oh, what meetings am I going to miss? How long is this going to take once I get there? You know, I'm on the spot, and I'm the odd person out, and there are all these other cool-looking kids walking around doing things in the office that I don't know what they're doing. So I think that that's one of the issues, is that we run into this with doing research, and that's one of the core objections to doing research is what Nate and Tony discussed. I've also heard this, building off that. We don't have time to go to this conference room doing some sort of inane exercise. We get that a lot, right? There's the idea of, oh, man, Post-its and cards and what is this, and squishy balls, and, you know, I got real work to do. We also see a lot about time, right? We can't spend tons of time, you know, 6 months, a year, just doing this navel-gazing work, talking to users. I mean, these people need to be doing their jobs, right? You're taking them away and they're going off to this focus group and they're doing their thing. And I think that there's a better way to handle that. Because these are the things that I see are the problems that we run into. And I've just got, you know, 5 things up here. Go through really quickly, but this will be also a time for shout outs. But these are typical objections. It is a time and cost suck. It's a time to the enterprise. It's a time to the an enterprise that's trying to get work done. You're taking time away from people, and they see time as, of course, a commodity. It also creates, research can tend to create an insular view of the product. That is, when we're looking closely at people doing that one thing, do we lose the context of what else they're doing, what other tools they're using? I was involved with a dealer portal thing in the automotive world. And the research team had set this thing up to do 4-hour segments at dealers. And they're going to go and watch them doing their, using this company's portal for 4 hours. Which, you know, my mind was like, are you kidding me? But they weren't really saying, well, what other portals are you using? Because they have other businesses. In manufacturing, people are using a lot of the same sort of things. You're ordering parts from 5 different systems. Well, if sometimes in research we just focus on that one product, which leads us into that whole navel-gazing idea, as opposed to navel-gazing, which could be great if you're into ships. But in this case, it is that idea that you are just looking so introspectively about the research for the research idea. We're just doing it for the sake of doing research. And that becomes a real problem in organizations that have dedicated researchers and whose only job is to research. So they have to do, you know, fish got to swim, birds got to fly, and researchers got to research, right? So sometimes that will lead to this idea of a disconnect with teams where there's the research team and then they hand off their findings to a product team or to some entity that then makes some decisions and then of course maybe hands that off to a design team or an interface design team. The point is that you end up with helping create silos. And part of the reason for that is that it becomes such a big deal to do the research. And so therefore it also becomes an easy line item to cut out of projects. What are some of the other objections that you may have heard in an enterprise setting that have blocked you from doing research? And this is something you don't have to get up to the mic, you can just shout it out.
If we talk to our customers, we'll ruin this future sale.
If we talk to customers, we'll ruin future sales. So that's in a case, right, in a case where the customers are the users in the sense of that internal product. Let's say, you know, Canon cameras. You're selling to corporate or industrial accounts that do multiple installations of cameras. But if we talk to them, that's a really good one. You'll somehow taint them from this new thing we're going to do. Back here.
Our internal subject matter experts are the subject matter experts. Why do we need research beyond that?
Our internal subject matter experts are subject matter experts. I mean, we pay them to be subject matter experts. We anoint them. We give them the purple robe. Come on. They got the blazer with the badge on it, right? SME, graduate of. Why would we ever talk to real people? And that's a really good one. And the answer to that, and this gets back to just that whole concept of research, which is you are not your user. And that SME, that subject matter expert, is just that. They're an expert. I've been in so many cases where people have said, oh, our users know what to do. Our users know the system. They know the thing. And I've always said, then you have achieved something that nobody else has, and I applaud you. Because you've achieved a system where nobody dies and nobody leaves. So you never have any new people come in. And that's obviously a big thing. SMEs, stakeholders. I used to be an account rep, so I'll tell you what account reps need to know, right? Yeah. One more, yes.
Piggybacking off that, when you have your own department, and like this is the research department, everything kind of has to funnel through them. And
Okay.
they kind of own that, so going outside, you're kind of at the mercy of what they do and what their budget is.
So the idea that there is a dedicated research department anyway, and why are you coming in to do that research? Yeah. And I mean, that's also something good. And part of that is, again, if you're part of that research team or you can engage with the research team, you can say, well, yeah, but let's research it. If they're doing the research, that's great. You know, game over. But often we see that line itemed out, or they're just doing research for the sake of doing research because it's their rice bowl. I do these references and I have to catch myself. The movie The Sand Pebbles, Steve McQueen, Catherine Ross, it's about China in 1930. Anyway, there's one point where this guy says, you're taking that job away from somebody. That's his rice bowl, meaning that's his existence. And sometimes we'll get resistance from dedicated research teams that we're taking their job. So, 100 years ago, I was stationed in Germany in the US Army, and hilarity about that. But I was stationed in Germany, and me and a few of my mates became friends with two English guys who were selling French Renault to American GIs on a PX in an old German base. So you can kind of do the matrix diagram there. Dave McMurdo and Steve Fleming used to have this great technique, and I'm sure you've heard the getting to yes, but the idea was with cars, all you want to do when talking with somebody is get to that first yes. So somebody give me an objection to buying this Renault or buying a car. It looks old. It looks old. If I could show you a car made by Renault that didn't look old, would you then be willing to buy it? I don't know. If I could help you understand why you have a lack of knowledge, if I could provide you with their knowledge, would you then be willing? Right? See, and that's where you want to go. The same with research. Every time we have somebody saying we can't do research, every time we get those no's, let's explore those objections. So, again, enter the who that I started off with. The name of the talk was based off of the song 515, and it really was just a catchy title. It's a great mnemonic. 5 and 15 have the last digit. 15 is a multiple of 5. It's a palindrome, right? 515 is a palindrome. But in the song is about Jimmy who has quadrophenia. Is everybody versed in quadrophenia, or is this helpful? Okay. I don't want to assume that everybody just knows the double album, Quadrophenia, released in 1973, but at a time when The Who was just kind of on the outs, and Mooney was literally certifiably crazy. But as Pete Townsend said, if he didn't have the drums, then he wouldn't have lasted as long as he did. But in the rock opera, Jimmy, our protagonist, he has quadrophenia. He says, I'm not schizophrenic, I'm bleeding quadrophenic. And he has these different personalities, and it's set against the mods and the rockers of the day of England in the mid-60s. And he, at one point, he's riding on a train called the 515. It's a commuter train. He's kind of going back and forth. But it inspired me to think about coming up with a technique that we can use in a nimble way that enables us to ask 5 questions in 15 minutes. We can be respectful, flexible, polite, accommodating, as you always are with user research. Everyone has 15 minutes to spare. Everyone, and I look at this in my experience of talking with a lot of different people and trying to set up user research. And people are looking at their calendars and their schedules, and I don't have an hour. In 90 minutes, I don't have a 90-minute block to spend with you. But when I ask, do you have 15 minutes? I can just come by your desk and sit and chat with you. Yeah, sure. Everybody's got 15 minutes, in effect. Doing it in situ, and it's important that you do it where they are. You go to them, because when you go to them, it's less disruptive for them. They can take a phone call if they get interrupted. If somebody comes to them and says, hey, the flay rod's gone all askew on treadle, they can go fix that flay rod at the mill. And so that's why it's also important to do it in situ. But you learn by seeing and hearing. You're not, the problem with remote research is, which is a great technique for it in and of itself. But we know that the downside is you don't see the environment really that well. There are a lot of upsides to it. Again, in your trick bag, you should have all these techniques. But in the enterprise, if you can go to where people work, go to where they do the things that they do and talk to them, then you can learn more without having to have a huge time suck on their part. Is that kind of jiving? Are we rocking on that? Okay, so here are the questions, and I'm going to go through these in depth, but so I'm going to go through each one except for the prerequisites and introductions don't count. Hi, I'm Joe Sokol. I'm, with company X, Regular Joe Consulting, and, my friend Shelley Cook has brought me to talk to you about what you do and how you do it. And just going to take 15 minutes in and out. Does that work for you? And again, usually they know that. And the second thing is, the reason that the prerequisites or introductions don't count on the 15 minutes is that you, in an enterprise setting, invariably you have to have a sponsor who has set things up. So you set them up to understand, hey, I've got to talk to this person because it's part of my job, and it's authorized because I've got Shelley here wandering around with me. It's different from I'll say non-enterprise or Marcom or ad hoc user research, where there's a lot more time that needs to be taken in the introductions and the selling. Usually this has already been done when this was scheduled. So the 5 questions: what do you do? So you're establishing, you're going from the broad to the narrow. What do you do? What's your role? How do you fit in the organization? Give me an understanding of where you fit. Typical day in the life is more narrow. It's like not what is your role, what you're supposed to do, but what do you actually do? Who do you work with? And there's a corollary to that. I'll show you if it's an information project. 4 and 5 are the nice counterpoints. What's the one thing that you couldn't do your job without, and why? And then what's the one thing that you would change or you wish you didn't? The bonus question is, what do you wish I had asked but didn't? Sometimes you're in the environment that kind of helps. And then you do this, thanks, the niceties, see ya, don't want to be ya, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go through each one of these and talk a little bit more in detail. So what do you do? What's your role? What are your responsibilities? And again, the first thing is, this is an icebreaker to get that person talking about themselves, not about the organization. One of the things that we see in user research too often is individuals will start talking about, well, here's what my department needs to do, or here's what my department does. But you have to start wherever they start by trying to focus them on what their role is, which leads nicely into the idea of what's a typical day in the life? What do you do? What did you do today to get here? And that's where you can really have people show you stuff. So I check my email. How do you check your email? Oh, I have to do my timesheet. Show me how. That's where you start getting into the show and tell ability. And that becomes really important. And that becomes objects that are bringing, again, the person into their specific aspect of what they're doing. Next, we want to talk about their environment and the connections that they make. So who do you work with? Who are the people that you do your job with? Almost nobody does their work in isolation. So that's where having the ability to explore the people, the departments, the customers, the other entities is really important. A corollary to that is in the same question space. I was thinking about this, is if it's more of an information architecture where you're trying to find out more about the content and the information and the organization of information, it's going to be a little different. Obviously, if you can ask both the questions, that's great, but then it would be 6 questions and it breaks my whole talk, and I'll just leave now. So I'm counting this as, but they're not, they're related, but it's usually one or the other. Where do you get your information that helps you do your job? Back in 2005, I think it was, I did this project with Capital One, and I can say this because the company I did this for doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, it was a long time ago, 2005, and I was doing some programmer documentation, developer documentation. And I said to the team, I got to go talk to them. And they said, why? I said, well, I have to find out who they are and what they're doing. They say, oh, they're developers. It's like as if that's like, well, they're keyboard elves. Okay, well, that tells me a lot, you know. Now I know. Well, I'm sorry, but think about keyboard elves. What do those guys do in that tree? It's mystifying me. But so the idea was, where do you get your information to do your job? And you know, how do you know how to do this thing? Oh, well, I'll pull this manual and I'll go to this page. Or, how do you know this? I get up and go talk to Bill over here because I don't know, but Bill does. Bill seems to know. And that, of course, tells us, you know, there's an information problem. Also, now the last two questions are, you know, what's the one thing you couldn't do your job without and why? So it's a closed, open question. And the thing about this is, what's the one thing that you couldn't do your job without? So we can understand, are we going to break the system if we change this thing, this service, this tool, this product, or this activity? So that's where thing needs to be mentioned in a broad sense. It's not necessarily a tool. It may be that if I don't have my desktop computer, I can't do my job. I've been in situations like that. And so, you know, concurrently, you also want to ask, what's the one thing you would change and why? What's the one thing about your job or about the tools and techniques and services that you have to use and why? So what we've done is we've looked at, you know, with the one thing that you can change, and usually somebody says, well, there are really 4 things. And the one thing you would, you know, you have to have, and it's usually, well, I need meetings, but you know, I don't really want to do meetings, but I have to do meetings, and I have to be able to communicate. You have to have Jabber. Jabber's like fabulous for me, and if you get rid of Jabber, I'm not doing it. In my personal job, it's sort of like get rid of Slack, and you know, swords would come out. I see Jabber coming up into my vision lately. So, and the important thing as a researcher is to know it's really not that particular tool. It is that ability, again, to have that one-on-one communication. Or our job is to be able to find out what's behind it. The obligatory so-called Frank Lloyd Wright reference of the talk is that when Frank Lloyd Wright designed Falling Water, Lillian Kaufman said, my God, Frank, I thought you were going to build a house next to the waterfall, not on top of it. And he said, in time you would tire of the view, but you'll never tire of the sound. So our job as UXers is to be able to see beyond just what somebody says. And that's where these questions can help us find out what's beyond what they say. And just finally, I think I've kind of gone over why bonus questions don't count. But the last question of, what's the one question that you thought I was going to ask but didn't, helps you understand their expectations of what the research and the project and all that is about. It's not that critical, though. And the second thing is that it becomes a good conversation ender if you are running out of that, if you have enough time. Again, time is of the essence. And when you say 15 minutes, stick to 15 minutes unless they want to go over. So that's where it's important that you manage your time effectively, and because what you want to do is make sure that you do the right things with the kind of research that you're doing with that person. It's a one-on-one engagement with that person. You know, you also want to record your sessions always. Steve Portugal said in interviewing users, great book, Doorbells, Danger and Dead Batteries. These are research stories. He's a great person. He said to me, always record. But when you do it, you take your notes, you stand up, you know, and you just, you leave the rest behind, you know, because, I mean, you know, Randall Brown. So that's important to do. So remember what you can learn in 15 minutes. Who our users are. Who are they? Who our users are, what they do, why they do it. Is there a reason for this? If there's no reason for what they're doing, you should Give them a list of a bunch of good fishing spots nearby. Again, Shelley will help you with that. Colorado game and fish and hunting. Where they do it, when they do it, because timing has to, all of those things. Again, you all know this, but Alan Cooper tweeted some short time ago, like past a year, that's a short time for me. He said, if you're not doing user research, you're not doing user experience design. I believe that, I really do. I think that, yeah, you're doing a part of it, but at the core, if part of your entire process, the entire team, does not involve user research, and we can talk about primary or blah, 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 doesn't involve talking to real people doing real things, you're just wasting your time. You could be out motorcycling, come on. So, that's the approach that I want to get to, and I want to refine that. I keep doing this, and I keep selling this. Give me 15 minutes, let me ask 5 questions, and I'll be out of your hair, but you know what? The product that we deliver will be so much better. So, that's it. Any questions? Come to the mic, please, so that I don't have to keep repeating. But yes, thank you for playing with me. I think it's on, I don't know, we'll just,
Maybe?
There it is, rock and roll.
Okay, so,
By the way, Shelley is hiring, she's looking for temporary Colorado-based researchers.
Okay, but amazing office.
That is not the way to sell.
I know.
I gotta be real.
It's about the mission. It's the mission. We have an amazing mission and conservation, and
Yeah.
my office is often a huge valley where I stand and talk to people and bid recreation, so it's pretty awesome. Yeah, okay. I'm working on that. How are you getting around the suspicion that you're evaluating the efficiency of an employee?
That's a very-
when you plop into them for 15 minutes.
That's a very good question, and in fact, I showed this to some colleagues, and one of them did come back to me and said, you may want to talk about how to reinforce that you're looking at, trying to find out ways to improve their experience, not about efficiency. When we do user research, when we do interviews, we always start with that. We're not testing you, we're testing the application, and there is still, different people, it takes a little bit of time. In the enterprise, that's where it's critical that you manage your handlers. Another project some of my team members are doing has to do with, they're doing interviews in situ, but they're bringing the client handlers are coming and they're participating and jumping in. And that's where it's critical that you have very clear rules and regulations on who says what and who doesn't. You want to have other members to be able to participate, to be able to understand research. I'll say that. You don't want those people to be guiding and cutting off and humiliating, which has happened, or sending them in a different path. It is the setup and the preparation that has to do. Second thing is you reinforce that at the beginning as part of your niceties. Hi, I'm Joe Sokol. I'm just here.